There you go.
Dharma, quick question. Part 2 of this is tomorrow still at
Yes.
1?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Part 2 is going to go relatively quickly. Today what we're doing is, okay, so the premise of this is to teach you how to do a testing calendar. Before you can do that testing calendar, you need to gather all sorts of information. So today, part 1 is going to be how we're going to gather the information and what information we're going to gather, where are we going to get it from. So that leads me to this first screen that I've shared with you, which is the SAC calendar worksheet / template. We've designed this as a way to kind of prompt you through the process. So this first tab that you're looking at down here, which is overview, the very first section up here is going to tell you, okay, what documents are you going to have on hand? So what we recommend is that you're going to need the testing calendar, which is the one that Miami-Dade County Public Schools puts out. We've given you a live link here so that once again, we're trying to simplify the process for you guys. And we've really looked at this from, okay, well, it's January, a new test year gets put in, they got to hit the ground running, you know, so you're going to see, particularly for you, Gina, who's very familiar with the process, that this is really meant to walk that person through and try to make their lives as easy as possible, so that at least they know what their steps are and where everything is, where they need to get it. That said, anything that you want to contribute, Gina, especially as a veteran tester, I would be most interested in, you know, knowing if you'd say, hey, listen, you forgot this, or you may want to change this here, whatever. Kathy, Jennifer, and I are both all three former test chairs. Jennifer's just out. She's our newest addition to our team. Kathy and I have been out. I've been out for 4 years now, removed as a school assessment coordinator, and Kathy's been out nearly 9, I think, as a school assessment coordinator. So not much has changed. Some of the guidelines, some of the exams have changed, but for the most part, the process is still the process. So the testing calendar, the school calendar, because you want to be able to capture and be aware of any early release days, any PD days, any holidays. You need to be able to plan around those. You're going to need the activities calendar of school events if you have one. If your school has one, then get it as early as possible. Even if you have one from last year, if nothing else, it'll give you an idea of the events that are traditional at your location and what you might have to dance around. Then you're going to need the number of sessions and the length of sessions for each assessment. That's actually included in this link here. That's the accommodations information. I'm going to show you real quick what that looks like. Where'd it go? It came up over here. All right. It's trying to come up. All right. So let me new share. Okay. So you should see this document at this point. Whoops. This document says session times, universal adjustments, and maximum for accommodations. This gives you a breakout by assessments of the grades that are being tested, the name of the respective assessment, along with how many number of sessions and the standard time for each session. The last column over here is going to be the maximum for the accommodations, so that you'll see that, for instance, here on the writing, it's one session and it's 120 minutes, but ESE, ELL, students with accommodations have up to one full school day. I'm right here on row 7. As you go down, here's the writing, retake, which changes once again. For the writing retake, the standard time is one session, 120 minutes, or up to half a day if needed, and up to one school day for students with accommodations. So this is going to be invaluable for you. FSA Mathematics, 2 sessions over 2 days, 80 minutes each. You're going to want to know this information when you're building out the calendar, because you have to make concessions for all of this. This is going to factor in, depending on the minutes of each session, it'll factor in as to whether you want to run a single session per day, or maybe you're contemplating stacking the sessions and doing one maybe starting at 7:30 a.m. and another one possibly starting at 11 a.m. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But do know that this document is available and it is very useful, even when communicating with teachers and with your test administrators. This is useful. So I'm going to come back over to my other document. Okay. So we're back on our original document. In addition to the calendars and the accommodations information that gives you the number of sessions and length of sessions for each assessment, we're going to come down here and we're going to let you know that you're going to need a list or a schematic of available labs and or rooms and the respective capacity for each room. And you're also going to list of students requiring special accommodations, one-on-one testing, braille, large print, one item per page, etc. You're going to have to factor that in when you're trying to decide how many rooms you're going to need for testing.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a class.
Here are some of the other items that we need you to consider and to remember. Assessments, when we talk about assessments, it's always going to be, is it going to be writing? Is it going to be ELA? Is it going to be EOC? Which assessment are we planning for? You're going to indicate the assessment format. Is it going to be a computer-based or paper-based? If it's computer-based, that means that the prevailing format is computer-based. In other words, 90% or more of all students are going to take this administration on computer-based. They may have an accommodation to take it paper-based, but it's based on an accommodation.
Medications.
Same for paper-based. Paper-based is going to be all your lower grades, grades 3 through 6, for instance, and ELA. Everybody takes that 3 through 7. No, 3 through 6. ELA is all paper-based. So if you were starting to organize or plan for an elementary school setting, you're always going to be on paper-based. The date of the testing window, that's information that's provided through the testing calendar. And Karenia, are you familiar with the testing calendar?
The one on the Dade School's website?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that's where this information would be coming from, the date of the testing window. The number of days in the testing window, you want to know how many actual school days are available to you within that window to administer each test. And I'll show you how that factors in in a minute. Number of assessment days. So if the assessment is a 2-day assessment, then you need to know, because you're going to need to schedule that group of students for day 1 and day 2 of testing. You need to take into consideration, how are you going to organize your students? Are you going to do it alphabetically? Are you going to do it by homeroom? Are you going to do it by subject area class? How exactly are you going to organize this administration? That'll have bearing on, how you assign kids to rooms. It's going to have a bearing on a lot of things. It'll have bearing on your test administrators and who you're selecting to administer the test. So that is really important to figure out beforehand, and that's probably a conversation that will probably be driven by your administration. In some cases, the administrations insist, a principal insists, hey, I want everybody alpha, I don't want the subject area teachers administering the test, in which case you kind of have no choice. So just make sure you get clearance from your administration before you decide that variable. Number of administrations per day. This is, again, are you going to stack the administrations? Are you going to do one at 7:30, which I call the AM, and one at 11, which I call the PM? Or are you just going to do one session? This requires a lot of coordination, and it's a lot of moving parts. So this is not recommended for a first-year SAC. Gina, have you ever done this at your school? Have you stacked your sessions?
Yes, I have, but I did not do it on my first year.
Correct. Not recommended on your first year. There's too much else that could go wrong. You don't want this to be amongst the things that could go wrong, because when this goes wrong, it'll go really wrong. So definitely not something that you want to tackle on your first year, but I do want you to become familiar with it so that you can contemplate it for subsequent years. So we'll talk about that. You want to know what your total number of computers are that you have available to you, as well as the breakout per room. Same with the number of seats that are available in each classroom and how many classrooms will be available for testing if you're doing paper-based. Well, you have consolidation rooms. That's a situation where you're going to identify one or more rooms to bring kids from other rooms that are sitting only, maybe you're towards the end of the administration for that day, and you've got Ms. Vasquez sitting in a class with still 5 kids testing, but you really need to get her back to her students or you're going to have a bottleneck on that end. So you say, okay, Vasquez, you're in room 4106. I want you to move all your kids, those last 5 remaining kids, to room 4102. That's an extended time room. It's going to be going all day. Take your kids, drop them off at 4102, and you get released back to class. So,
you know what I've done in that situation? I don't like moving students in the middle of testing. So what I've done is I've posted a sign on the door of Ms. Vasquez's students, for example, to go to another room.
Yes.
And keep those students in the same room and let them continue. And I just put someone else in there to proctor.
Yes. But here's another, and here's another caveat on that. It drives me crazy to know that a teacher is sitting with only 2 students in her room or 4 students that are still testing. And some of these kids will whittle down that clock.
Oh, till the day,
till
the last minute.
Or 1 kid sitting in a room.
Yes.
So you'll have 3 different rooms with 1 kid in each room. And I dealt with that the first year. And then I decided, okay, you know what? Everybody needs a lunch break. You have to provide them lunch if they're going to continue testing throughout the day. So I tell them, take them to lunch. And right after lunch, you're going to put them in the consolidation room, release that kid, or put them before lunch, right before, so we would coordinate everybody. We'd say, okay, listen, the change is going to happen in time for 11:10 lunch. So at 11 a.m., take those kids to the other consolidation room. Now that teacher takes all the kids out to lunch, and then they come back from lunch and they continue testing.
Okay.
And everybody's
like
in
that.
place. So things to think about. All right, so let me see where else or what else.
So you're allowed to, like, if a kid is testing in room 306, you're allowed to move that student after lunch or after a break?
So here's the caveat. Anything that happens with that kid needs to be noted. So I would note it 2 different ways. I would have them note it on the seating chart, both the outgoing seating chart and the incoming seating chart. So let's say that they were in room 2108 and they're being moved to room 3500. Room 2108, I would have them record on that seating chart, student moved to 3500 at such and such a time. Room 3500 would record on their end, student moved in from 4108 at such and such a time. So I would even capture the transfer time from one room to another. Then in addition, I'm sure I've talked to you guys at some point. You've heard me say about the sheets, the cover sheets that I had, the testing, not tested, still testing. Those still testing cover sheets would have any kid that's been moved from one room to another. Those were the kids that were appearing on that still tested sheet. And then there it would be recorded again, the student's ID number and the room that they were taken into and the time that they were taken in there. So everything is recorded everywhere so that at any time, God forbid an investigation should happen, you can have a look back of exactly what happened with that student. So if you're going to do that, Karenia, now again, you're a first-time test chair. So not even this do I highly recommend as a first-year test chair. However, at some point, you have to give these kids lunch. So you have a natural break where you have to take them to lunch and bring them back. So if you're going to do it at that point. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, during a big break, so it's easier.
Right. Okay. And then will you have holding rooms? Holding rooms is if you want all the kids to meet at a particular room, say the auditorium, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, an exceptionally large room that you have at your school, for whatever reason you're having all these kids meet you there. It could be because you're waiting for a room to empty out from an AM session and you have a stack session, another session that's starting in the afternoon, what I call PM, which is really an 11 AM session. So I'm going to hold them there so that they're not roaming the school. Some of them will have just gotten out of lunch. So I don't want them roaming the schools. They're not reporting back to their classrooms. So I'm having them report back to this room to then send them from there to their respective test room. You're going to always work with bulk numbers at this point of the planning phase. Remember that you're talking, like I would start doing this process in November for the spring. October, November, I'm already starting to build all this out. So I'm dealing with a snapshot of who is sitting in my school now. Those numbers are going to change. They're not going to change drastically by 20s and 30s. They're going to change maybe teens, doubtful, mostly like handfuls. 5 came in, 7 left. Situations like that. So you're going to work with bulk numbers because at this point, we just want to know more or less what our testing season is going to look like for the purposes of the calendar. You're going to want a group breakdown. So try to figure out what nomenclature you want to use for identifying these students. So think of it this way. You have 500 kids to test, but only 200 computers available. You're going to funnel these kids essentially through 3 groups. You're going to have to break these kids up into 3 groups. Group 1 is going to be the first 200 that test. Group 2 is going to be the second 200 that test. And Group 3 is going to be the remaining 100 students who test. So you got 3 groups. But then each group requires 2 days of testing. So Group 1 is going to test Group 1 day 1 and then Group 1 day 2. Group 2 is going to test Group 2 day 1 and then Group 2 day 2. And Group 3 is going to test Group 3 day 1 and Group 3 day 2. Does that make sense, Karenia?
Yes.
Okay. Then you're going to think of it in different terms again, and you're going to say, okay, number of students tested per day, which is the same breakdown that I already gave you. But now you're going to say, okay, well, for instance, come back here to group breakdown. If you're running an AM/PM session, you may want to think of it in terms of Group 1 day 1, Group 1 day 2, or if you're running 2 sessions, you're going to say Group 1 AM day 1, Group 1 PM day 1. Then for your second group, which is going to be that whole other group that's now testing for its first day, you're going to say, okay, this is going to be Group 2 AM on their first day, and then Group 2 PM on their second day. Okay, so those are all the things that you want to think about when you're figuring out how you're going to group these kids and how you're going to identify the groups of kids on the calendar so that it makes sense not just to you but kind of to everybody so that everybody knows what's going on.
This also helps out with the certification tool
100%.
that we have to do early.
I used to hate the certification tool, but because I would do this so early, by the time the certification came through, I'm like, bring it on because I'm ready for you.
Right.
And the certification tool for me was always very confusing and hard to wrap my head around until I started building this out. And then when I started building this out, I'm like, okay, in my head, this makes sense to me. So now I can convert this easily into the certification tool. The number of students tested per day is that breakdown. You're going to look at the total number of the total number of students that you have against your total number of computers. And then you're going to break it out from there and you're going to say, okay, 500 students, only 300 computers. So 300 are going to test the first day. The other 200 are testing the second day. So here's Group 1, day 1, day 2. And then here's Group 2, day 1, and then day 2. And all this information would go on my calendar so that at all times I'm seeing what's actually happening in as much detail as possible, which then also helps because this calendar will become your Bible, essentially. It will go with you everywhere you go. And every time you have a meeting and the activities director says, we're going to do a pep rally on such and such a date, you're whipping through your calendar and you're looking up such and such a date and you're going, no, you're not going to do a pep rally that day because, I have this going on that day. And testing is one of those things that will always trump anything else going on in your school. So you're on limited number of days. You can't offer a whole lot of flexibility to the other departments in manipulating your schedule. Your schedule is the primary schedule during that time because you have a certain number of days to complete this in. Okay. So going on from there, you're also going to include...
Sorry to interrupt. I have a question.
No, go ahead.
What would be your advice, for example, let's say we have a FSA reading going on and the due date, the last day for students to be testing is December 1st. When should I be scheduling like the last day for students to be testing then?
So the rule of thumb, I always loaded my schedule. I front loaded everything, right? So I wanted to get the maximum number of kids always as early as possible. So I'm going full boat, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then I'll ease off the pedal a little bit. But if you want if anything goes wrong, you want to ensure that you're going to have enough time to kind of have a comeback surge if you should need it. So you can't eat up through your days. You can't like pace it at, oh, I've got 200 kids to test, but I have 100 computers. I'm only going to do 50 kids at a time. That's really not a good idea because if anything goes wrong, you're going to find yourself in the weeds. So it's better to always push and be ahead of the curve than be behind the curve. Okay? And some of that will also be dictated by your administration. But by and large, the administration understands that, yeah, you got to keep this fast and furious pace and try to get this over and done with as quickly as possible to avoid any calamities. All right, because listen, there's been days where the whole system has imploded and you just lost a whole day of testing. And it doesn't seem like much, one whole day, but that one day represents 300 kids. And now your whole schedule just went off rails. Because if it's a day 1 testing, what are you going to do tomorrow? You're going to have to do that day 1 testing tomorrow. So when do those kids get that day 2? If this is 9th grade and you've got on the 3rd day of your calendar, you've got day 10 starting their first day of testing. So it is a dominoes effect, and you got to be very careful how you're playing the game. So, okay, some of the things that you need to when you're building out your calendar, always try to include as many details as possible. Like I would not only use this nomenclature that I have above it with a grade A G1, D1, 300, but I would also throw ELE or ESE or 504 or STND on that so that I knew what that session consisted of or who that session consisted of, because I know that if on a Monday I'm running grade 8, group 1, day 1 with 50 students and their ESE, ELL, then I know that I have rooms that are going all day. So I have to be careful in how I proceed with the scheduling or what happens that day throughout the day. I don't want bells turned back on. I don't want, kids being shifted around the school because that could impact those kids that are still testing and they may possibly go all day long.
What's STND?
Standard students. So those are kids without any accommodations. Okay, those are kids that have no IEPs. It's just your regular kid that's going to always adhere to the standard timing for each session. So if they have 80 minutes, they have 80 minutes beginning to end. You don't have to worry about that room going late. It's not going to go late unless you have technical issues. All right. Additional considerations. Do you want to schedule on an early release day? Personally, I never did. Why? Because once again, something could go wrong. And if something goes wrong, once those tests are started, they have to be completed that same day. Unless there is a huge problem, they're going to have to be considered that or completed that same day. I don't think that they would look favorably upon, scheduling on an early release unless there's something else in the schedule that prevents you from doing that particular administration on any other given day, and you have to utilize that day. But if something goes wrong on that day, you now need to call Maria Bruguera or Jennifer Fernandez or Kathleen Sierra and let them know, hey, listen, it's 10:30. We're about to, release early, and we still haven't been able to do our writing test. And, I'm running out of time in the day to be able to do that. We're not going to meet the window. Well, there's going to be a problem because then they have to take it up a notch to the DOE. So now you're facing possibly what's it called, an invalidation of all those exams for all those kids that are sitting in those labs. So you need to be very, very careful and ensure that you're providing each student with the time that corresponds to them. Are you going to assign unused labs as makeup rooms? And what that means is, you remember how day one we're maxing out our labs? We've got 300 kids. Go back up here to this sample here, or the example. So we have 500 total kids. 300 are testing as the first group. 300 are testing in our second group, 200 are testing in our second group, which means that I have 100 computers available to me because I have a total of 300 computers, but that second group only has 200 kids. So do I want to start makeups in those available rooms? And the makeups would consist from whoever didn't show up as part of group one, these 300 kids. Anybody who didn't show up there, you can easily start making up on the first day of group two testing, just in your vacant labs. Okay? So you want to take that into consideration. Another thing you want to take into consideration is, are you going to require any school schedule deviations? We were traditional 1 through 6. So what I implemented on my second year was, you know what, for testing purposes, we're moving to block scheduling because all this moving around in the school is crazy and it's killing us with testing. So what we moved to was odd, odd, even, even, traditional 1 through 6. That was our week. Second week, it would be the same thing. 2 odd days followed by 2 even days followed by a traditional 1 through 6 on a Friday. And that's how we did it until we'd get through the whole window. You may want to adjust the bell schedule. We did that too, where we would shorten homeroom, or we would lengthen other periods and shorten the ones at the end of the day to be able to still maintain a 1 through 6 schedule, but keep the kids in place as long as possible to accommodate testing during the morning. Do you have to change lunch waves or create a third lunch wave if you already have 2 to accommodate those kids that are testing? I was very creative. I was always very, very creative. And, at the end of the day, you have to take into consideration that what you want is the best environment as possible for these kids to test. So the less movement there is in your school, the better it is for them to be able to concentrate, for the teachers. There's less chaos for kids wandering around, not knowing where they're supposed to be going, or, their teachers not being in class because they're still administering a test and they got hung up administering that test, and you anticipated that they were going to get out by third period, and here you are at third period and they're still not out. So, the more you can batten down the hatches, the better it is. Down here, part of best practices, you should really take into consideration meeting with your all your administrators and all the who's who that are going to have their hands in your pot pretty much. And for us, that included the activities director, all the department chairs, the IT coordinator, cafeteria manager, head of security, anybody who is going to have to play or be impacted by anything that's going on at the school at that level, which is virtually all the leads. It's all your leads.
Custodians too.
Custodians.
They have to move things around.
Absolutely. Let's add him real quick.
Yeah, I put mine to work during testing.
So do I. I used to email him in advance, by this day I need this many
right.
Seats in each classroom. So yeah, what you want to do is you want to meet with these people, and so that everybody's on the same page and so that nobody's caught off guard, and because you're going to need the help. So the more people that you can assign various tasks to, the better off you're going to be. because you're going to need to lighten your load. It's not that you want to. You're going to need to lighten your load as much as possible. Okay? So in this case, you let the IT coordinator know, hey, listen, we're testing as of this day. Make sure all the labs are ready. You let your head custodian know, hey, as of this day, we're testing in all these rooms. Go around, make sure that all the rooms are, 30 seats in each room, all facing the same direction. And you make that somebody else's responsibility so that all you're doing is a quick walkthrough and making sure that everything has been done the way it's supposed to be done, but that you're not going into a classroom by classroom having to do all this yourself because there's no time. And you can't leave it up to the teachers because, FYI, it won't get done. Am I right?
Yep.
Yep. It just won't get done. You tell 10 teachers, hey, I need all your classes, all 10 classrooms, everybody pointing in the same direction and take anything sensitive off the walls. Promise you that in the morning, out of those 10 rooms, you'll be lucky if 3 did what you asked them to do. And then you're scurrying around. So this, I thought, was super instrumental. All right, so now that you've gathered all this information, or you have an idea of what you need to gather, we've created these worksheets, and the worksheets are by school level. So this first one is high school. The second one is a worksheet. Middle school. And the last one is elementary school. So Karania, unfortunately, because you're K through 12, you're actually going to be using all 3.
All of them.
Yes.
The good news, though, in my case, there's 2 school assessment coordinators, so it's not just me.
Okay. Well, that is helpful.
Yeah.
The other good news in this is that this actually walks you out or walks you through exactly the information that you need as it corresponds to each of these different levels, right? So for the elementary worksheet, you'll see that we're only using up to column M, whereas middle and high, we're going all the way to P. So we're including 2 new columns in this one, actually in the middle school. Middle school is the one with the most number of columns, and that's because they have more like test dates that they have to pay attention to and some other things. So let's look at the middle school one. Gina, I think the middle school one is a good one because it kind of covers both you and Karania. So
yep.
Let's hold on one sec. We've been working on these all day as these meetings have been going. So we've been tweaking as we go. All right. The first 2 rows up here, row 6 and row 7, are sample rows, and that's why it comes in blue, because we'll put it in just as a sample for you guys. Now, 2 documents that you're going to have to look at for this section of it, this first section. You're going to want to look at your Miami-Dade County Public Schools testing calendar, and you're going to want this accommodations info. The accommodations info is this guy right here, okay? And the calendar, you know what the calendar looks like. So, so we're back on our sheet, on our worksheet, and we're going to go through and let's look at the first one. Let's see what this FSA writing says. It says, okay, FSA writing grade 6. What format is it in? It's in paper-based.
Dharma,
So,
we're still seeing the accommodations worksheet.
Yeah.
Okay. No worries. Sorry about that. As Jennifer was getting in and I hit the admit and forgot to do the share. Okay. We're back on the worksheet, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this first row, row 6, you're looking at FSA writing grade 6. You have a pull-down menu here. It allows you to click in which format is it in. In this case, it's PBT. So we put in PBT. We would then go over to our calendar and would say, okay, what's the testing window for FSA writing grade 6? We would go down that chart and we would note that that window is April 2nd through April 15th. So we wrote that in.
Dharma, sorry to interrupt. So I know CBT is for industry certification, but what's PBT?
No, CBT is computer-based testing.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So CBT is going to be, what format is the test in? So the test is either going to be a computer test or it's going to be a paper test. But even in the instance of computer test, you have accommodated paper, right? But by and large, the format of the test is intended to be a computer-based test. However, students with accommodations are allowed a paper-based version of that test. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the actual format of the test is intended to be a computer-based test. Okay? So number of days in window, that's not going to be applicable because we have the test date right here. And students have to test on April 2nd. So anybody who doesn't test April 2nd becomes a makeup. That's why we put this column in here, column E, for this for the middle school, because there are some tests where it's not optional what day you're going to test them. You have to test them on that given day. For instance, by comparison, we have writing grade 7, which is a computer-based test. And then here we would put in what the window is for it and how many days, which is what we did here with math grade 7. Where there is no said test date, you actually have 21 days for these students to test. You see the difference there, Karenia?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just the industry one. It's something CP.
No,
I think it's CPT or something like that. Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about because we used to have those too.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I do want you to see the difference here in column E with the test dates. Okay, if it's a computer-based test, you're not tied to a specific date. You're given a window and you're told the students need to test within that window. It's up to you where in that window, but remember you're playing with other exams. So you're playing with other CBTs at this point. So they're all going to have the same window, and it's up to you within that window for you to schedule all the tests. Whereas here, they're telling you, hey, grade 6, which is paper-based, has to test on April 2nd. All right. So then as you continue down, you say, what are the makeup days? Here they give you, if the window is 4/2 through 4/15 and you have to test on the 2nd, your makeup days become the remainder of that window. So anytime the 3rd through the 15th. Here, you have the entire window. Your makeup days, same thing. Wherever you decide that this test is going to fall, the rest of those dates are going to be makeup days. And then days, go ahead.
Dharma, so in this example, I would start testing May 1st and do that week, and then the week after would be makeups?
You could. You'd have to look to see what else is in that window. Chances are that your civics EOC is going to be in those windows. Your Algebra 1 is going to be in that same window. Your biology is going to be in that window. Anything that's part of the FSA or your grade 8 math is going to be in that window. So see what I mean is you kind of have to, you got to look at the window and not just, in fact, let's look up the calendar real quick. Hold on.
You've also got the 8th grade science, which is paper-based.
Correct. Yeah, so the overall picture before doing that, yeah.
Here. Okay. So we were on, what test are we looking at right now? Math grade 7.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at, it's going to be here. FSA, here it is. You got Florida Standard ELA.
Ten cuidado, Alejandro.
7th. Student achievement.
Is it the one that one? Yeah.
Right here. It's this one right here. So in this case, you have the 1st through the 29th. You're doing 7th and 8th grade at the same time in that same window, but you're also doing, if you have geometry, if you have Algebra 1, and if you have all your EOCs. So see that all these tests, the mathematics, the Algebra 1, geometry, biology, and civics, which all would pertain to you, and U.S. history, are all in that same big window. So then it's up to you, using your calendar, which is why we're teaching you how to do a calendar, to decide which days within those windows are you going to do which test. Okay, and that'll be more evident tomorrow when we get to that section. You'll see how this all plays together. Yeah, no problem. So, okay, so now we need the nitty-gritty on all of these. You come down here to number of days per administration. How many days do I have to administer the test? In this writing, grade 6, it's a one-day test, and it only has one session. This over here actually has 2 days. It's 3 sessions over the course of 2 days. So you're going to do session 1 on day 1 and sessions 2 and 3 on day 2 of testing. That's how this one is set up. Okay? Then you're going to figure out, how do I want to run these tests? Am I going to organize the kids alphabetically? Am I going to test them by their class? Maybe in this case, grade 7, I'm going to have all my 7th grade math teachers take their kids down and test their own kids. But maybe for writing, for whatever reason, the writing department doesn't want it that way. And they've asked, no, we're all going to share the responsibility. I want you to mix up all the kids. So we're going to do alpha for that one. If you're not going to do alpha or class or homeroom, and your school has decided to do something completely different, you can at any time override this. So you can say organized by date of birth if you want. Doesn't matter. You can override any of these drop-down menus. The only thing that will happen is that you'll get a little red indicator up here, that little red triangle, that when you hover over it, it brings up a little note. Input must be an item on a specified list. So it's just making you aware, hey, you selected an item, or you've written something in where there's supposed to be an item placed there from the list, from the drop-down menu. All right. You're at this point now, and now you're ready for this. This is going to come from a file download manager. So I'm going to quickly show you a file download manager that we prepped. Okay, so you're seeing a file download manager here, right? So this file download manager started its life like any other file download manager. It's just one huge dump of information. And maybe this is just a quick and dirty FDM that I went in and grabbed just to be able to start parsing out my numbers. I would have, incidentally, the list on my desk. I would probably have printed this out. Or if I have a second screen, I'll put this on one screen and bring in the FDM on the other screen. So you want to be able to see both documents at the same time is the point, okay? For just to ensure and minimize, to ensure accuracy and minimize errors. Because when you're going from one document to another and, bouncing back and forth, it not only is it inefficient, it also lends itself for errors to occur. So let's go back to our other document. Okay. So we're here. It's a couple different things that we can do from here. We can either use pivot tables, which we did our whole little session on pivot tables before, the training sessions. So I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but I'm going to show you quickly how it's done. Or we can use just the filter function on Excel to quickly get the information that we need. But before we do that, we need to think of, okay, what test am I prepping for right now? In a high school or middle school setting, you're going to get, on your initial download of information, you're going to get students repeated, right? Because for every period, if that's one of the criteria that you select, you're going to get the kid repeated for each and every period that they have at your school. So the first thing you have to do is you got to create a tab with students without duplicates. So all you did here was just grab everything that's on this first tab, dump it into a second tab, and get rid of your duplicates, which we've shown you how to do before. So, but if you need a refresher, let me know. That's easy enough to do. If you're going to do, and this would allow me to get like a quick snapshot. So I put a filter on here, and now I can quickly see how many kids do I have in grade 9. Right here, I've got 644 in grade 9. You see it down here in the lower left-hand corner. Out of those kids, now that's absolutely every 9th grader. Now, if I wanted to see, okay, yeah, but how many ESOL kids do I have? I'm going to click off 5 and 4, and I'm going to get a quick number of 72. So I have 72 kids that are ESOL. Now, this year we also had to contend with the ESOL exit date. So here, if I needed to, which I don't, it's not even populated, not sure why, but I could put as of what day. And we could capture those kids that were, oh, because these are level 4s. So we can get all those level 4s, which were 72, and then we can say, okay, of the level 5s, which exited before, and then we put our date. You guys remember what that date was? April something?
April 1st. So April 1st, 2018 and beyond.
Okay.
You need to put after.
Oh,
equal to or after. There you go.
Okay, I go here, and now I see that I have an additional 54 who have recently, so I've got to add my 72 and my 54 to come up with my ESOL number. Okay. Now I'm going to clear these, and I'm still got my 9th grade filter selected, and I'm going to say, okay, give me everybody except for anybody who's in gifted or blanks, because my blanks are going to be students that don't have accommodations, and I'm looking for all students with accommodations, and I'm going to get a quick and dirty number of 48. Okay, so I'm going to record that real quick, and let's see what else. 504s. I'm not sure this file has 504s on it. It does, but I don't know where.
Dharma, where it says section, right next to ESC, column V. Sorry, column V.
Thank you.
Dharma, exactly. I have a question.
Yeah.
For the ESC exceptionalities, all the different letters they have, is there a website or somewhere I can go to figure out what those letters stand for?
Just today, we put up on the resource page, I'll show you that in a minute, what those codes are.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, 26504s. Okay, so what I did, I jotted down, and you're always going to see, when you filter, you're always going to see your number down here. So 504, it found 26 out of 2,597. So that's a really quick and dirty lookup using the filter function. You can also use on, how do you get your numbers? Gina, do you use Perry at all?
No.
Okay. I used to use Perry sometimes too, but okay. So another way to do this is through pivot tables. So in this case, I said, okay, I'm going to isolate all my Algebra 1 kids. So I isolated my Algebra 1 kids, right? So this would be for like 9th and 10th grade. Anytime you're doing like just one grade level and you just jump from grade level to grade level, getting all your numbers. So now that I have my 504s selected, I can come over here and say, okay, well, how many do I have in grade 10? I've got 23 of these guys. Okay, so I can start backing out of some of this stuff. And I can say, okay, give me the ESC exceptionalities. Again, I'm going to release my gifted, and I'm going to release blanks because I only want. So now I got 38 for 10th grade ESC. 38, 23. I would do the same thing for ESOL. And remember always to release and clear all your filters before moving on to your next thing. And you come here, you get rid of level 5s, get rid of blanks, and I got 75. 75, and then Again, I would say after, let's see, where am I? Oh wait, I got to release my easel level here and grab easel 5 this time. And we're going to say date filter after. We're going to change this to is after or equal to. Kathy, what was that date again? April 15th?
April 1st.
First. Okay, I put in my threshold. I click enter, and I got 45 of them. Okay. Another way to get the same information is you go to Algebra 1. In this case, it's Algebra 1 that we're working with. I've isolated my Algebra 1, and I've created a pivot table. So now from here, I can see, okay, well, I have 236 kids total that don't have any accommodations. I have, oh, and let me show you that also. Hold on. Sorry. So if I come back here to my no duplicates, release everything here. And now again, you would get, okay, let me have everybody in 9th grade. And this time you're going to do the opposite. So you're going to say, don't give me the C's or the F's or the G's or the H's or the J's or the K's or the P's. Give me the L's and the blanks. 596. Or I could have taken this total number of 644 and subtracted out of that the quantity of ESOL, the quantity of ESEs, and the quantity of 504s. You don't want to count your same population twice, right? So right now, just because we have grade 9 filtered, we don't have any other filters on this. So this is grabbing every single 9th grader in your building. But you went already through the process of identifying who an ESOL, which is 126, so you would take that 644 minus the 126 minus the 38 ESE kids, or the 48 ESE kids, minus the 26 ESOL kids. Does that make sense, Karania?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, likewise, if I click on any of this here, I can grab my number of ESE kids from here. Once I'm done with ESE, I throw that back in the pool. I can then grab my 504s and see them here. So I have 15 that are 504 for Algebra 1. I can throw that back and I can say, let me have ESOL, and then I can filter this ESOL by ESOL exit date. Actually,
which would you personally recommend is easier in your opinion?
As a first-time test chair, if you're not familiar with pivot tables yet, pivot tables can get confusing. Mm-hmm. Filtering can get confusing too because you have to keep track of what's filtered and what's not filtered, and but I think filtering, it kind of depends on how your brain works, but filtering might be a little bit easier than pivot. Gina?
Me, filtering is easier. I tried pivot once and I gave up.
Pivot can be very confusing if you're not really, until you become adept with it, it can be really confusing.
I think now during the summer I'm going to try it again. But I mean, my first time that I tried it.
Of our trainings?
On the pivot one, I did. Yes, that's why I want to try it. Did it help? It gave me a broader view of it. So now with the notes I took and everything, I'm going to sit down and try it.
If you get stuck, reach out to us. Let us help you. Because it really is a good tool. It's very useful.
It was overwhelming for me at the beginning.
Most of the stuff is, and it's not until you actually start trying it, and in Spanish we say, dándote los cabezazos, where you keep falling and smacking your head, and you're like, oh my God, I can't get this through my head. Eventually you will, with enough trial and error, you will. But let us help you to make the learning curve a little easier.
Thank you.
So once you've gone through and found all your numbers, then you're going to come here and you're going to start filling this in. So let's see, what did we get numbers for? Grade 9. So let's pretend grade 9 is actually grade 7. So let's start filling it in. It's a CBT. The window, I believe, is the same as this one. So for the purposes of just hurrying this up, I'm going to throw it down here. Grade 7, I'm sure, has a specific date that it has to test on.
No, it's not paper-based, so no,
that's
it
right.
doesn't have.
That one's not paper-based. Yeah.
No.
So we're going to say it's got the same 21 days window, and the makeup days are going to be the same as these up here. And we're going to say number of days per administration. There's 2 of them. And number of sessions per day, or number of sessions, a total of 2 sessions. And I'm going to organize this one by class. All my English teachers are going to come through and test their own populations. I'm going to start parsing out my numbers. So ESC, I have 48 for this grade level. ELLs, I identified 120 of them. 504s, there were only 26 of them. Standard was all the remaining, so let's call it 538. I don't even remember what that number was. It wasn't that high. 498. Okay. Let's say that that was our population. And then now within these, you want to say, okay, out of this population here of the ESEs, the ELLs, and the 504s, how many are actually paper-based? And you're going to need this way down the line, but you may as well just go ahead and note it here. Because, again, you need to plan ahead. So you're trying to think, okay, how many paper-based do I need? Because I'm going to set up all my labs, but I'm going to need 1 room or 2 additional rooms for the paper-based. So, whoops. Let's say you look up these students, and at this point, you're either going to your department, your ESE person, coordinator, or you're going to a counselor, or you're going to yourself into Excelify and identifying these kids. Kind of depends on how your school works, or you're getting it from an AP. But let's say you get your list and you actually have 15 kids that are going to need paper-based. And then special accommodations are your unique accommodations, your one-to-one, anybody that needs one-on-one testing, anybody that needs Braille, that needs any of the special accommodations. And let's say you have 4 here. And you see that our number here didn't change. And that's because these guys are subsets of these guys. So you've already identified them here. And that's already tallied in over here. If you bring these kids and tally them over here, you're counting them twice. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You guys understand,
yes.
right, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that's already a built-in function for you. The idea is that in a day's time, you're going to make quick work out of a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, however long it takes you to fill this document out. Once you've got all these parameters in place, your calendar is going to come together really quickly. And we're going to see that part tomorrow. However, right now, I want to show you quickly some of the other tools that we've added to this that you may or may not find valuable. One of the things that we did was if you come over here to room chart, oh, and by the way, I would print this at this point. And you can print it when it's empty and have it in front of you. But you can come here to print. And this is in Google Sheets. And I would recommend that you leave it in Google Sheets, although you can download it into Excel. If you're going to leave it in Google Sheets, then you're only going to have the capacity to view this link with the link that we're providing. You can only view the document. So you're going to have to do a save as. And you can just save it to your own Google Sheets or to your own drive. Once you save it to your own drive, you have full reign on whatever you want to do with the document. You can add to it. You can modify it. Make it work for you. Just know that there's formulas in places, so be cautious because you don't want to screw it up too much. If you do screw it up, no big deal. Go back in and grab our form again, download it again, and start your manipulation all over again. All right? You're going to want landscape here. And down here, you're going to say not fit to height, but fit to width. And it makes sure and it squeezes the whole document in on one page so that you're working with one page with all your information on there. Print it, and now you can have it on your desk, and you can either go filling it out by hand and then bring everything back in, or you can leave it by hand, whatever works for you. So or you can print this out at the end and keep a permanent record of this. Or maybe you'll do one in September, October, or November, December, but then come February, you may have to tweak some of it. So you have your original form that you've already printed out, you come back in, you make some changes, or you save it as an electronic file. Again, whatever works for you. When you go to room chart, you're going to see that, okay, we're ready to start building out the room. So going back to the original plan that we had, we're going to call this group 1. Oops. You can write in group 1, or you can put AM1, whatever works. So let's say that this is, for us, it's just going to be our first group. You're going to put in the dates of the particular administration. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm just going to grab this to make it as quick as possible. And I want to say this one's going to run the 1st through the 2nd. So this is my first 2 days of testing. And the assessment is going to be math. Math, grade 7. Okay, so I'm going to start building it out. And this is your template, so I'm going to, instead of saying room 1, I'm going to put the room number for me. And I'm just going to fill these all the way down. And now I know what I'm dealing with. The capacity for this room, that can seat 25, but there's one computer that I refuse to let them use because it's in the corner, which means that one kid can look at the other computer and see answers. So I'm not going to give them the full 25. I'm going to say 24. And on my seating chart, the one that I'm going to give them that's already by room, specific to each room, I'm going to make sure and put a big X on that computer that I do not want used, so that the staff or the test administrator knows not to use that particular desk. So that has a capacity of 24. This one has a couple computers that's broken in it right now, so I brought that down to 23. This one is at full capacity and it's fine. This one is shorted by 5 computers, so it's only 20, et cetera, et cetera. So then across here, okay, AM. How many do I want to assign in this room? I'm going to assign all 24. And what type of room it's going to be? It's going to be an ESE room. And who's the administrator going to be? It's going to be Rodriguez. And then you're going to see these two over here. I want this one to be a consolidation room. See right here? Consolidation room. So because I'm stacking sessions, I know that I cannot add a second session to this room. This one, on the other hand, I'm going to put 23 kids in here. And again, this is going to be an ESE room, and it's going to be run by Fernandez in the morning. And then the second session is going to also have 23 students, and they're also going to be ESE, but this one's being run by Sierra.
So just to make sure, consolidation room is the room they're testing in, and then the holding is just where they're waiting after the test, right?
Wrong. So
wrong. Okay.
Holding room can be after the test also. So let's do another one, and then I'm going to show you how this all works. So 4104, I have 25. I'm only going to put 23 kids in there for whatever reason. And this one's going to be an ELL room, and it's going to be run by Bruguera. And in the afternoon, Bruguera is going to run the second session too, because Bruguera is a counselor and I don't need to get her back to a class. This one's going to be my consolidation room. So for this session, this AM session, if we've got kids still sitting in that room for this PM session,
yeah.
I'm going to tell Bruguera, hey, Bruguera, take your kids, the 3 that are still testing, and move them into the consolidated room, which is going to be room 4102. So now it clears that room and makes sure that the room is ready for that PM session. There's nobody in there. Gina, do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever you did here on day 1, you're going to do on day 2. You're going to do the same thing on day 2. So you would, part of you.
So just to make sure that I understand this, so consolidation room just means you have a few kids left testing, and how you were saying before, you want the teacher to go back to pick up the kids. So these students are going into this room to finish their test, right?
Correct.
Okay. Correct. And then the holding room is just a large room, like an auditorium.
This one I'm going to make a holding room. No, maybe I want to make this one a holding room. And this one maybe has 40 seats, 40 computers in it. And it's got, I'm going to assign all 40. And this is going to be a standard room that's going to be run by Saya. And
so what would be a holding room then?
I'm going to show you now.
Okay.
40, STND, CZAJA. Okay. So I've selected 4105 as a holding room, and I've put this check mark here to avoid me from making any assignments here because this is a holding room, which means that now I can tell Sierra for her classes to report to 4105, and I'm going to take one of those labs to let Sierra's kids all day long funnel into this lab where I'll be sitting watching those kids. It can be that. It can be a holding room where I'm going to have these kids that are supposed to report here. Half of them are at lunch. The other half are coming from classes. Well, the ones that are at lunch, I'm going to tell them, hey, report here, because I don't want them barging into room 4106 if no one's there or if this AM session is still running and they get out of lunch early and they figure I'm just going to go report to the room early for testing. I'm going to say, no, you guys are going to report to room 4105. Once I have those 20 floaters that are coming in from lunch in there and it's time to open up this afternoon session, then I'm going to move those kids into room 4107 so that they can start testing. Does that make sense, Karania?
Yeah, I get the difference now. Thank you.
You get the difference? Did you see that, Gina?
Yeah, I have a holding tank too.
Yeah. Yeah, and for some exams, like for instance, for Cambridge, for me, it was optional. It was required. I had to have all the kids meet in the auditorium and check them and do all my due diligence before I release them to the test rooms.
I use my holding tank also for the AM session, all those students that arrive late after testing has already started.
And that's a great idea. That's something that I never did, but would have been really invaluable because then,
And also for students that missed session 1, and now I'm working on session 2 today, but they cannot test, they will be in the holding tank that day.
Yes. See? So there's different uses to having that holding tank. And it doesn't have to be one of your labs. You can just, that's why.
No, I have a regular room.
Right. But that's why I've given you the flexibility of being able to write over this so that you guys can put whatever room you need and call it whatever you want over here. In the interim down here, as you go entering here, you can keep count and track of, the number of kids that you've already assigned. So far we have 66 out of our total. Let's say, we keep putting, and it breaks it out by AM and PM. So at all times, you have a running total of how many you've already scheduled for morning and how many you've already scheduled for afternoon, because that number you're constantly deducting from this number over here. This is your target number. So this is the number of students that you need to, what's it called? The total number of students you need to schedule. So that's the target number. You want to hit 692. So you're going to continue this process on the room chart until you have all 692 scheduled. Now, you're not going to get them all scheduled on one chart because you only have X number of rooms, particularly labs. But that's why I've given you 1, 2, and 3. So 3 times you've got the same snapshot. So this would be days 1 and 2. So this is your first session. This is your second session. So this is going to be your first day of testing. This will be your second day of testing. This would be your third day of testing. This would be your fourth day of testing with the new group. So this is group 2. So remember that the second day of testing is always going to be for the same group as session 1. So, and then lastly, this is day 5 and 6 of testing. And if you need more than that, you just go through, select all these rows. You need to copy, come down here to a blank row, and paste. And you can make this infinite. You can add as many of these charts as you need. Okay? So again, do you have to use this? No. Do you have to use every element of this? No. If consolidation rooms and or holding rooms are never going to be a thing for you, wipe it out. That's it. It's gone. Bring it back in. You can hide it in case you want to leave it there, in case you ever want to see it again, or you may use it down the line, or just leave it alone. The last thing that I want to show you guys before I let you off this long call is going to be the assignments and the all staff. Now, this is something that I used to use when I was a test chair at my school. We had an initiative that everybody in the building had to test. So I would go in and say, okay, the first day for our testing window is going to be, whoa, not that. The first day for our testing window is going to be May 1 through May 2. And the assessment is going to be math, grade 7. And this first room is going to be the extended time room. And it's going to be room 4102. And it's going to be ELL students. And the test administrator is going to be Fernandez. Okay. I'm not going to have a proctor because it's a small room. And I'm going to say Fernandez, coverage for Fernandez. So I'm going to figure out a way that I want to reference this. So I'm either going to say, let's see, coverage will be by Danash in room 1218 for her. Also on that same day, so all this is going to be going on, but this isn't going to change, but this will change because each room is going to be different, and this will change. And this is going to change. And this is going to change. So basically, you're taking the room chart that you did here, where you're assigning everybody, and you're putting in a condensed format here. And you're saying, okay, this second room is going to be standard. And you'll see the method behind the madness. Whoops. And this is going to be room 4103. And this is going to be Rodriguez. Oh, no. The type of room is going to be standard. And this is just going to be periods 1 through 3 is what I'm venturing. That's how long it's going to take. And this is going to be Rodriguez. And no proctor. And actually, coverage or these kids, I need send to or put students to 2400. So in this case, any kids that are overflowing that aren't going to be tested, let's say she's got 3 kids that aren't going to be testing that day for whatever reason, they got to go to room 2400. So I'm putting all my information there. Then as an entire notice here, I'm going to say 5/1, let's say, is a Tuesday or Monday. So I'm going to back up and I'm going to say 4/28, let's say, ConnectEd. So I want to remind myself to send the ConnectEd calls, emails. I also want to remind myself, I'm going to add a second note in here, put no bells. Now, once this gets built out, it's going to look like this, where it's going to have all the information that I need. It's going to tell me who's providing coverage or where the displacement is happening. It's going to give me all the important notices. And I'm going to do this as we move throughout the year. So this will also be a document that I would have started in November, and I'm working on this continuously. And I'm identifying as we get closer to each test administration, I'm going to assign test administrators. And the reason that I have this all staff list is that as I go assigning staff, like I did here, that I already assigned Fernandez and Rodriguez, I have this sheet that's linked into it. And here I've placed every single possible test administrator in my building. And since our initiative was to ensure that every single teacher tested, then I want to keep track and I want to make sure that that I've used every single staff member in my school. So as you can see here, I've got Fernandez. Yeah, she's already been assigned. And Rodriguez has been assigned. I still have Bruguera, who doesn't have an assignment, Shea, who doesn't have an assignment, and Sierra, who doesn't have an assignment. So as I go down and continue my long list of assignments or of tests, I keep assigning test administrators, and every time I assign a test administrator, it lets me know on this sheet, yep, it's been assigned. They've been assigned. Two things happened with this. If, for instance, Sierra, I said coverage, substitute, my substitute locator, because they had access to this file, so, as did my my principal and some of the APs, they knew that if I needed a ConnectEd, they needed to get on it. They knew that, and the date by which they needed to get on it. They knew to remember, hey, no bells. So if the principal was out of the building, I didn't have to worry because I knew somebody was monitoring this sheet, and the bells for sure were going to be turned off. The sublocator would know well in advance that on May 1st and May 2nd, I needed a substitute for Sierra. So everybody was monitoring this sheet at the same time. So I was actually accomplishing a lot of things, and it's all the little noise, all the little dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's that I could just like let go of, right? Because now I didn't have to worry about this. And sometimes I put reminders for myself. And sometimes I'd say the kids have to report to the KPAC. So I would make sure, hey, don't forget today the kids have to report to the KPAC. So the same announcement that you've been making for 3 days, add today, students testing for Cambridge must report to the KPAC. Oh, okay. See, so it kind of kept everybody in check and in sync. This is what it looked like on this end. So here are the sample ones that I did for you guys. And you'll see that there's a bunch of them here. If you throw a filter on them, now I can deselect everything, only select the ones that don't have an assignment yet. And now I can make quick work of coming down here and say, well, why does it, okay, well, Barnett, that makes sense. He's the activities director. So I'm not going to assign anybody to him. De Leonardis, oh yeah, I know why. De Leonardis is running PERT boot camp. So I'm not going to assign anything to her because she's already doing that, and I'm already taking her out of class for that. So then I do a double filter, and I say, just show me the blanks, and now I get a real list of the people that are still available to me. So, oh, look, ARCA, I still haven't assigned. All right, well, ARCA, here you go. And this becomes really, whoops, not there. This becomes really valuable the further down the list you go. Let's say Weinberg is going to be out. And now I already checked and I know I can use ARCA, so I'm going to put ARCA in, and ARCA, we're going to get department coverage for her. I come back over here, and in real time, ARCA is here. I come back here. Well, no, now I come back here. I say, give it to me again, just with NAs, and ARCA goes away, and now my list is accurate again. Again, you can use it, you cannot use it. It's there as an idea. It worked for me. It may or may not work for you. We were a big school with a lot of moving parts, so for me, it helped. That's pretty much about it. Any questions?